Welcome to the Performance Enhancing Podcast. It's like steroids for your brain. A podcast for people that want the best info, but just don't have the time. Get your podcast fix with the Cliff Notes versions of your favorite podcasts. No fluff, just the actionable golden nuggets. Having this much knowledge at your fingertips should be downright illegal. So get ready for another dose of Performance Enhancing Podcast with SatoriPrime. Here's your host, Ilan Ferdman.
Hello everyone. Welcome to another Performance Enhancing Podcast. I'm Ilan Ferdman, co-founder of SatoriPrime, and today we're looking at part 2 of Joe Navarro's What Everybody Is Saying. Now, part 1, I've gotten so much feedback on that people were so impressed with what this is. They'd never heard of this nonverbal communication. They'd never heard anything that in depth. I forgot to mention last time that on top of being an ex-FBI agent, he also was the catalyst for a show called Trust Me, I'm Lying. So if you ever caught that, that had to do with him. And again, if you haven't listened to part 1, I highly recommend you do that. That was episode 29. So just go back and grab that one. And today we're going to go into part 2. And then I've also broken this up into a part 3. So real quick, just for those that didn't, this is a review of What Everybody Is Saying, a book by Joe Navarro. Like I said, he was an ex-FBI agent and really gifted at behavioral analysis and non-verbal communication. So with having said that, I just want to jump right in because there is a lot of material to cover. And if you want to know kind of the basics of how this all got started, again, go back to episode 29 right now. And you can do that, all right? So in part 1, we spoke about legs and feet and how those are the most honest part of the human body. So now we're going to take a look at other parts, and we're going to begin on this section. We're going to do the torso and the arms. So when I say torso, I'm obviously talking about the chest area. And, you know, as a generalization, when things are thrown at you, what's the first thing you move, right? Like you move your torso away from that object. And it's pretty much the same thing with things that we like and don't like. So if you like something, you tend to lean towards it. If you don't like something, you tend to lean away from it. That's the very basic stuff, right? And now we're going to talk into more things to look for when you're in these interactions and how you can get a leg up on how the interaction is actually going. So when you're in a rocky relationship, or as people say, you know, our relationship is on the rocks, you'll actually tend to turn the front part of your body, so where your face and your chest is located, away from that person, as opposed to when we give our kids hugs. So when you give a kid a hug, you literally open yourself up, like your arms go away from your chest, you're really, really open, and you completely open this side, which is really, if you think about it from back in the day, your heart's here. So this is a very, very vulnerable part of the body. So when you're covering this up, you're protecting yourself. And when you're opening it up, like to our kids, for example, then that means that we're really open and safe and comfortable. Okay? And like I said before, things that you like, you're going to lean into. But that's also how you're making yourself vulnerable. And another way to look at it is when someone, if you notice you're having a kind of heated conversation with someone and they disagree with something that you're saying, they'll either lean back or they'll actually, like we said kind of before with the feet, they'll actually turn that torso area away from you. So another good indicator to know if what you're saying is kind of argumentative in nature and people aren't agreeing with it, that's definitely something to look for. Now, specific things to businessmen, and I think we touched up on this on part 1, but anytime men are uncomfortable, we will, you know, button our jacket, unbutton our jacket. We will reach to fix our shirt or watch, or sometimes, you know, fix the tie for too long. So instead of just like an up and down, you know, kind of holding on to it, all of these things tell us that someone is actually uncomfortable. Now, women, on the other hand, tend to cover their stomach or chest with their hands or notebooks. So if you notice, I'm going to just try to grab something. We'll do a shameless plug for Ben Greenfield's book here. Beyond Training, which is pretty incredible book. But women tend to go like this, and this is kind of developed. I mean, I remember girls walking like this with trapper keepers in high school even, and that's a way that they protect themselves also. But remember, not every signal, like we talked about before, signifies something. Ultimately, it's within the context. So you kind of have to see what the situation is, and then you need to also look at what their baseline behaviors are. So for example, sometimes people cross their arms and everyone's like, oh, they're not engaged, they want to talk to me, etc., which is kind of like basic things that we've been told. But sometimes, honestly, it's just because people are cold, right? Because this actually warms up our body. So knowing that someone's in a colder room or tends to be colder, that's the kind of stuff that you need to be aware of in order to deduce whether it's a normal pattern and a normal behavior or something out of the ordinary, in which case you can start looking at whether it is some abnormal behavior, which could lead to some discomfort, for example. Now, the next thing I read in the book actually kind of blew my mind because really it hit very, very close to home. And how many of you guys get upset stomachs when you're nervous or upset? So for someone like me, when I would go on DJ gigs, like I wouldn't be able to eat, my stomach would just be in butterflies before I get up on stage. So anytime I'm in a stressful situation, my stomach is the first thing that gets affected, okay? Now, there's an actual reason why this happens, which I was completely unaware of. So when you're nervous, blood actually gets sent to the major muscles in your body as a preparation to escape. So think back in the day, right? You were in a stressful situation. Stress usually comes from some made up fear about survival. Now, back in the day, that fear was real. There were actually lions chasing us, Today, it's kind of made up fear. But regardless, we're not even going to touch on that. The physiological aspect of the body is still exactly the same. So when the body senses fear, senses stress, or survival, then it goes into that mood and it pumps all the blood into your legs, which are going to get you out of the way, into your arms, which will help you fight, etc., and away from your stomach, which is the digestive part. And that's why you experience stomach pains or even a loss of appetite during these times, because you're going into that freeze, flight, or fight mode. So that was really cool for me to learn, just kind of the science behind what's actually happening in my body. Not that it helps me control it by any means, but it definitely makes me more aware and in tune that, that happening means that I'm in a stressful situation. So if you're someone that gets really affected by the stomach, then now you can correlate that to the fact that maybe you're in a stressful situation. And sometimes that happens from just the thoughts inside our head, like having a significant other or whatever it might be. Okay, so I want to make two other points about the torso that I thought were really fascinating, and then we'll move on to the arms. So first, a quick look at the shoulders. When you ask someone a question and they kind of shrug their shoulders like this? Well, from now on, I want to show you something, how you can actually deduce whether they're being truthful or whether they're lying to you. So the cue occurs actually in the amount of the shrug. Okay, so for those watching on video, you can see this. For those listening on a podcast, you're probably going, what the hell is he doing? But I'm moving my shoulders up and down. If they bring the shoulders only half up versus fully up, that's kind of what you're looking for. So half up means they're lying, while bringing them fully up means they're being honest. So if someone's like, I don't know, and they're bringing them all the way up, that actually means they're pretty honest. And if they're just going like, I don't know, and they give you like a half shrug, it actually means they're being dishonest. So that's something cool to pay attention to. And another thing to look for is when people lift their shoulders slowly. So you probably, I see this with my kids a lot, and kids are very nonverbal. This means that someone is actually trying to hide. So think about like a turtle in the wild, covering their head. It means that someone's afraid, they want to disappear, or basically not be seen. So if someone is coming with their shoulders up and it's kind of like a slow movement, it really means that they're super uncomfortable and they don't want to be in that situation anymore. So you might be asking someone a question and they kind of go into this mode like, I want to disappear. That's the flight response happening in the body, and that's how they're showing it in the physical world rather than getting up and running. Okay? And then finally, I just want to say a little bit about clothing. He touched up on it. It's kind of obvious, but worth mentioning anyway. The clothes we wear send a particular message. So the question you got to ask yourself is, what is the message I really want to send out into the world? So I'll give you an example, like Orthodox people, Amish people, people who love a particular sports team, a businessman or a woman. Every one of these people is trying to portray something. In fact, I'd imagine that even as I mention those types of people, every single one of you listening right now or watching this probably envisioned every single one of those people and every single one of those outfits, because that's the way our brain functions. So what does that tell you, and how can you use that to your advantage? So I think it tells you two things. The first is, we as human beings make snap judgments. If I say Orthodox Jew or Orthodox, religious person, an Amish person, a person that loves a sports team, your brain is automatically creating those images, okay? And it's not bad. It's just the brain's filtration system. In order to make things easier on the brain, it generalizes things. And instead of viewing everything as new, which takes a lot of brain power, it starts card cataloging everything. And so when you hear that word, something of that nature. So that's kind of gives you a very general sense of what arms tell us. So let's look more now at social situations and what arms can tell us. So when people hold their arms behind their back, right? Like some people will just walk and hold their arms behind their back like this. It actually is sending a message to the world: don't come close. I don't want to deal with you. I don't want to interact with you at this moment, okay? Likewise, if you reach to shake someone's hand and they don't respond, right? You feel very rejected. It's a very kind of stops you in your tracks moment where you're like, wow, that person's an a-hole, right? But they just flat out rejected you. They don't want to touch you. They don't want to interact with you. The fact is that touch is actually very, very important to humans. In fact, it's been scientifically proven that health, mood, mental development, and even longevity are affected by how often we experience loving touch in our lives. So for all you out there with spouses, I will tell you that for women, touch is much, much more powerful than for men. So just merely touching your wife or significant other or whatever will make them feel like they are more loved, which is true, but in fact, it actually has a scientific backing, okay? So touch is very important, right? So this is the very reason that touching people's arms between their elbow and their shoulder, so right up here, okay, is an incredible way to let people know that you like them and that you're safe. So if you never notice that people tend to touch people in this section, it's just very, very warming, lets people be at ease. Now, the ultimate of this is a hug. Again, because you're really open, right? So you're saying to someone when you first meet a person and you hug them, it's basically sending a message to the limbic system, because we're showing them our palms, right? We're opening this all up, and it's saying, hey, look, I'm here. I welcome you. I'm not here as a threat. And the limbic system processes that and automatically puts them at ease. So, for example, for someone like me, I actually love giving hugs to people that I first meet. I actually make it a point that when I meet women, I try to even give them a kiss on the cheek. And what I've noticed is that it completely disarms people, and it automatically breaks that ice. It makes the conversation flow, and it makes everything very, very warm. And if you think about it, it's kind of a ballsy move. Not a lot of people do it, right? I know, especially when I go in to kiss women on the cheek. In Europe, it's very customary. But here in the States, it kind of takes people a little, there's always that fraction of a second when they're like, wait, what's he actually doing? And it's brave. And so right away, in that 1 second, without having said a word, what you've basically gone and done is say, hey, listen, I'm so comfortable. I so welcome you in. And that in that moment makes you appear to that other person as someone that has confidence, someone that knows who they are, and someone who's open. All three incredible qualities when you first meet someone, right? So try it out. See how it goes. It might feel awkward at first, but trust me, you get the hang of it, and it works amazingly well. Now, at the very least, if you're not going to give people a hug or a shake for whatever reason, then make sure that your chest is open and people can see your palms. Again, sends that same message to the limbic brain saying this person is open and welcoming and safe. Okay? Now this will be the last point about arms, and then we'll wrap up this part and finish up in part 3. But the last thing that I want to look at with arms is what Joe calls arm splays, which simply means taking up more room with your arms. So if you've ever noticed where you're standing at a counter talking to someone, there's people that keep their arms kind of one on top of each other and right there on the table. Other people will take up a lot of room. They kind of like really spread their arms out wide and take up a lot of that space. It's a territorial thing. So if someone splays his arms and then gets asked a question, okay, and narrows them greatly, so they go literally from like taking up a lot of space and leaning forward to drastically kind of bringing them close to their body and right in front of them, then that's a great tell that they're either lying or have not done what you've asked them to do. So when you're confident, okay, you tend to spread out. You tend to take out more space. When you're not, we tend to withdraw and keep things very tight. So make sure when you're approaching people, you're watching for these arm splays, because it's a really simple way to tell if someone's honest or lying or comfortable or not comfortable. Okay? So that's a little bit about arm positions. So with that, I want to wrap up part 2 of my golden nugget takeaways from Joe Navarro's What Everybody is Saying. I absolutely, like I said, love this book. Very, very eye-opening. And I'm in communication with Joe to hopefully be on the podcast live with us next month. So I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. And if you know someone that would get value from this information, please share the podcast with them. Also, the best way you can support Performance Enhancing Podcast is actually not by sending us money or anything like that. It's simply by going to iTunes, rating this podcast, and leaving a comment. Because basically what that says to iTunes is people are really liking this podcast and they actually share it with more and more people. So again, our intention is to get this information in as many people's hands. So if you'd be so kind and do that, we would really, really appreciate it. And until next time, everyone, I'm Ilan Ferdman. This has been another Performance Enhancing Podcast, and I'll see you on the next one. Have an amazing, amazing day, everyone.
Thank you for joining us on this week's Performance Enhancing Podcast. We've taken this pep talk and created a custom action guide so you know exactly what action steps to take now to grow your business. Just head over to SatoriPrime.com/podcast and download it for free.